What's up, everybody? Kevin Allen here, and I'm gonna do a little special something for week 17. This week we launched some new features to the Domination Station Optimizer over at dfsarmy.com. And in case you didn't know, a lot of times the reason we launch new features, new functions, is because, quite honestly, I'm making lineups and these are things I want. So over the course of this season, I found that one of the best approaches to mass multi-entry in daily fantasy football is to really limit exposure of certain teams, players, to, in essence, their quarterback. So what I'm trying to say is, if you're making 150 lineups, there's going to be players in there that really only belong in a lineup with their quarterback. And the reason, now you might be thinking, well, if a play is a good play, it's a good play. Why does it matter? And the reason is, when we're mass multi-entering, there are certain plays that we're jumping on that are suboptimal. In essence, meaning they wouldn't be great plays standalone. But with their quarterback, it makes sense. Because the one thing that we know in daily fantasy sports, above all other things, is to win a tournament, all of the players in your lineup need to exceed salary-based expectations. That's how you win the tournament. You don't win the tournament by hitting value everywhere. That doesn't win a tournament, that wins you a cash game. And if we're trying to win a tournament with mass multi-entry strategies, we have to look for spots, A, that not everybody's on, that might be suboptimal, where a player could go off. And we also have to think, if that player goes off, how does that affect other players on his team, particularly their quarterback? And the third thing is, we have to look at, if I'm using this suboptimal player and he doesn't go off, he's going to kill lineups. So which lineup should he kill? And that's really the essence of this. I want Amari Cooper, for example, last week, not this week, but last week. If I wanted to use Amari Cooper, the idea is I might as well only use him with my Dak Prescott lineups, assuming I'm using Dak Prescott that week. And if you're not using Dak Prescott that week, then you really shouldn't be using an Amari Cooper because he's the only guy he throws to. So, in essence, a player like Cooper who's up and down. You know, sometimes this season he's had 40-point games and 5-point games, and 40-point and 5-point, right? So on the week where he has a 40-point game, you might as well just stack him up with Dak because Dak is beasting in that game as well. He's usually an underpriced quarterback, lower cost, and if his wide receiver's doing that, he's probably scoring well over 20 points, which is great. So I want them together. But on the weeks where Cooper doesn't do anything, I don't want him killing lineups across all of my 150 entries. If I just had a 30% exposure to him, he would just be killing lineups everywhere. So if I can contain the damage to Dak lineups, then it's like a kill two birds with one stone. You get one turd performance, you get two turd performances. You know, whenever you're playing other sports, think of it like this. You're 35% owned on a player and 15% on another one. You know, the 35% guy and the 15%er both have duds. Well, you're like, oh man, you know, if they're in separate lineups, that's 50% of your lineups affected. But if they're together, then only 30%, in essence, the one dud. Now, if you lower that to 15, it's just killing less lineups. So I'll go through it here. It's the new stacking functionality we have on the Domination Station for NFL. And in essence, what it means is you can not only stack quarterback or defense with players, but rather you can stack running back, wide receiver, tight end. So I can limit my wide receiver exposure. And here's one. So this week in my lineups, and we're going to run through the actual slate in a second here, but I just want to show how this works. Let's say, you know, Austin Carr is one of these backup wide receivers that might play for the Saints this week. So if I'm adding him into my player pool, I don't really want that guy in just any lineup, right? I don't know if he's definitely going to start, if he's going to do anything. So I'm going to limit my exposure to these sort of backup Saints wide receivers to only lineups that use their quarterback, Teddy Bridgewater. So I can leave Austin Carr in the pool, but set up this stack wide receiver name with exactly one of, and then the 2 quarterbacks in his game, because I do game stacks as well. So here I just set up stack wide receiver Adam Humphries with exactly one of Winston or Bridgewater. In essence, what this rule will do is make sure that while Adam Humphries is allowed in my player pool, he will only be used in lineups with Winston and Teddy Bridgewater. So it's really cool, and this is something that I've been trying to set up manually by sort of adjusting salaries and with these stacks lowering the salaries for those particular players. But this way is actually much better. We'll be able to have even more control over the optimizer when creating mass multi-entry lineups. I will always say this, I think the best way to approach mass multi-entry is to set up a separate optimization run for each quarterback combo, so you can kind of do game stacks and team stacks and favor game stacks even more so. But for the interest of time, a lot of times we want to end up just running 150 lineups at once when we're attacking those mini games or those quarter games or the dollar games or the $4 games or the Nintendo, whatever type of mass multi-entry contest you like to enter, right? So let's just jump right into this here. And I've already kind of established a player pool, but I'm going to go through it with you and kind of go over everybody that we've used. The player pool comes off of mainly the Geeks Pick sheets, which you see here. These are the sheets that I put out every single week for DFSArmy.com VIP subscribers that break down all of the players, all of the games, what type of contests we should be attacking with the various players, and why. This is the sheet, and this is mostly the player pool. I will say this, I do add more players than this to my mass multi-entry pool. I try to keep the Geeks Pick sheet more in what I call cash or hybrid approaches. Hybrid being, in essence, handcrafted lineups that I will throw at larger tournaments. We don't just make one lineup, right? I want to try to attack, you know, your when I say larger tournaments, I mean larger dollar, but not necessarily large field. And by large field, I mean larger tournament could be 500 entrants, 100 entrants, 1,000 entrants, a winnable type of a contest, 2,000 entrants, but not so much these are not really optimized or set up to attack like the 300,000 entrant contest where you really want to get silly and ridiculous. You need an even bigger player pool. You need to kind of do some things in those type of contests that are off chalk, which I don't like to do as much of, but you get the idea. All right, so let's run through the player pool. The way I always start out setting up my player pool is I go position by position. I'll uncheck all of the players, which I've already done. I use this button to uncheck everybody, and then I'll check off the players that I actually want to use. Now, we start with the quarterback position, and in this case, what I'm doing is setting my minimum exposure for each quarterback to where I want it. And I'll just go through these guys real quick. It's a little breakdown. Now, Pat Mahomes, dude is a beast. Okay? Look at his salary. $7,100. Very similar. Like, he's not enough above everybody else to really reflect the fact that every single week this guy puts up massive numbers. I mean, look at the floor. Even in blowout situations, now a lot of these games were close games, but even in some blowout situations, he's had pretty big games, like the Cincinnati game, 36 points. Here's another blowout situation against Cleveland, 30 points. Rams, of course, we all saw that one. Oakland. So, I mean, this was kind of like a blowout, but not really. And Seattle. So, they've been in high-scoring games every single week. Now, I'm not sure that the Raiders are going to make a high-scoring game of this, and that's the concern with the Pat Mahomes. But that floor is so high, the ceiling is there, so I love him in cash. I do think we should be able to find some cheaper alternatives in tournaments, which is why I'm not going 100% on Mahomes. Obviously, but you know, one of the things about Mahomes and the DraftKings salary algorithm is it really doesn't pay all that much to try to pay down, especially in a week like this where there's a lot of value at other position groups. But, you know, yeah, you could pay down. but you're just not saving that much. So Mahomes seems pretty safe to me. Next up is Ben Roethlisberger. Again, a must-win game. League worst Cincinnati defense. Do I think the Steelers have the potential here to lean on the run? Yes. Is Roethlisberger as consistent of a scorer as Mahomes is? No. And for the same price, again, more of a little bit of a GPP play because I don't see any chance to where the Bengals are putting up points. And that's a theme this week. A lot of these players in must-win games are taking on teams that don't have to win and are basically just, playing their last game and they suck. So it's a really interesting week overall because there are very few games that are going to be close. Here's Aaron Rodgers. Love what he did last week. When Aaron Rodgers is basically calling the shots, he does really well. So, I can't see, once again, I can't see the Lions, being competitive in this one. But this Packers defense is pretty bad, so you never know. One of the things I like to do, again, because we saw last week what happens when the opposing team is competitive, that's what happens, right? Last week, every Aaron Rodgers lineup I had pretty much had Robbie Anderson in it as well. I wish I used so much Elijah McGuire, and he must have been in there as well. And then, kind of would have liked to have had a little more Herndon than I even did. But that's what happens when the score goes up and they're scoring back and forth. This happens. Okay, rest of the year, not so much. Tough matchups. Been a tough matchups year for Aaron Rodgers for the most part. Anyway, but last time they played the Lions, it was at the Lions, but he certainly scored nicely. So if we went by that, I like Rodgers this week. I don't want to get too deep into that part of the analysis. But when it comes down to games that might be competitive, here's one. Matt Ryan, Jameis Winston, 51-point total, 1-point spread. That's the shit. Ryan's been winning people tournaments all season. Assuming they play him the whole game, I don't see why they won't. He's been nothing to play for a few weeks now, and that hasn't affected the way that they've approached the game. So I expect them to just play it out. Both teams, for the most part. Yeah, Matt Ryan, Bucks defense, Winston, Falcons defense. I love this game. I'm going to raise it up. Let's see where we're at. One of the things to note, you have to set up, these cannot exceed 100%. So we got 20, 30, 40, 52. Twos are tough, man. 40, 70, 90, 95, 100. So there we go. Got exactly 100% exposure, spread out. I'm not as in love with Mahomes. The more I think about him in tournaments as I maybe... Yeah, no, I'm keeping 20%. I have this idea that you got to pay down and hit the right guy in tournaments really to win the tournament, which is true. But if Mahomes does a Mahomes day, and I do like the fact that they don't have their established running back situation going on, and the running back situation is a little weird. We'll get into that on the next one. But these are our basic. This is for me my quarterback pool for the week. A couple guys that didn't make the list: Lamar Jackson, Kirk Cousins, almost, but didn't quite make it. Cousins for me, just because they're taking on Chicago, and I don't think Chicago's going to be able to score. So I don't see a high-scoring game, even though Cousins does make sense as a play. But I want high-scoring games. Jackson just has a very limited ceiling with what he does. Hasn't exceeded 20 fantasy points. Can't throw. Can't complete passes. Very high floor, but more of a cash game type play in a week where Mahomes isn't on the slate. Foles I'm less high on than I was last week. The price came up. And the situation is really different, facing a Washington team that will not be able to score. I think Foles will do fine. He could throw for 3 touchdowns. So that's fine. Love Josh Allen here. And he's at home. Again, not a high-scoring game from a Vegas perspective. But Allen's done really well at home. This Miami defense is terrible, and I think they're going to want to showcase what he does ahead of next season. So all good stuff. Now, let's talk about stacking functionality. And I've already done this, so we don't have to sit and go through the tedium. But here I've got Pat Mahomes with no less than one of Kelsey or Hill. I've got Roethlisberger with no less than one of Brown or Juju. The reason it's not no less than two and I don't add more guys in here, it's just because the expense of these players. You can't really have Mahomes, Hill, and Kelsey all together in a lineup, or you can't force a lot of lineups that way. It's very limiting. So I want, and if you force them with both, then there would be some situations where, if they don't both, you're asking for a lot of things to happen in order for that to work. And there are situations where I'll stack with two, and I'll go over those. But not Mahomes, a guy who runs and might throw to a few different people. Same with Roethlisberger, it's got to be one or the other. You can't just afford Brown and Juju in the same lineup with Ben unless you really do some other things. It's okay to have a few lineups that way, but I don't want to force everyone that way. Now, the difference is with Rodgers, if I'm going to use him, I do want him with two of his pass catchers because one guy isn't enough for Aaron Rodgers to crush value. In other words, Davante Adams would have to put up 50 if Rodgers just throwing to him would be enough. So what we do is we add in these other two guys, and I did this last week and it worked out really well. Both Scantling and last week it was Equanimeous St. Brown did well. This week Cobb is starting. He's back in. These are the three starters at the moment. If Davante Adams doesn't play this week, he is out for me completely. I will remove Aaron Rodgers from any sort of stacks. Ryan, no less, I'm just straight up stacking him with Julio. Now, he's got some other guys he throws to, Sanu, Ridley, Hooper, and I think if Ryan is having a great game, one of those other guys would be involved. So I don't have an issue of no less than two of and throwing those other guys in there, and then setting up a parameter that those guys are exclusively to be used with Matt Ryan. So if we wanted to do a no less than two of, and we added Sanu, Ridley, and Hooper into the mix, or we can even do a second, if I wanted to definitely have Jones in every single one, and then one of those other three in every other, as well in every lineup, you could do a no less than one of Julio Jones, and then another Matt Ryan with no less than one of, and then those other three, and then we can stack each one of those other guys with exactly Matt Ryan or Jameis Winston in order to make sure that they don't show up in other lineups. I don't want Sanu without Matt Ryan. I don't really want Calvin Ridley without Matt Ryan either. Those are not plays that I like as straight up plays this week. So that's how we would set that up, and that's how we'd use the new functionality to do it. Here, Mike Evans, for example. Stack wide receiver Mike Evans with exactly one of Jameis Winston or Matt Ryan. In essence saying, I'm going to save Mike Evans for Winston Ryan stacks. Now you might say Evans sounds like a good play straight up. And he is, but my feeling is if Mike Evans is going off and having a GPP winning day, then Jameis Winston probably is too. So I might as well, because Evans is such a volatile player, he's so up and down. Every single week he'll have like a 10. He's very expensive, but he'll have a 40, but he'll have a 10. His returns are really all over the place. A classic quote-unquote GPP player. So I want to keep him to this game stack so that he doesn't fuck up my other lineups if he blows it, right? Now, that's different from someone like, and I'm going to throw one of my favorites out here, and I'll throw a couple of them out there. That's different from someone like Julio Jones, for example, who basically is a very consistent wide receiver and certainly has been, for a few weeks here, so he doesn't only need to be stacked with Matt Ryan. More so, another guy like that, and I have a few guys like that this week, but another guy like that is Davante Adams. Very consistent. So, he's a player that I don't mind using just straight up, even without their quarterback. Because, again, Adams can have a big game without Rodgers having a big game if Rodgers only throws to Adams. Same thing with Bobby Woods, right? Very consistent. No Todd Gurley. Puts up numbers every week. Underpriced. So he's a straight up play. Same thing with Julian Edelman. Now he's in a great spot this week, putting up pretty consistent numbers. Now he's in a particularly great spot against the Jets in the slot. So, he could be played without Tom Brady. I'm not using Tom Brady, so definitely going to have to be that way. So there are certain players that I like for just general plays and other ones that are specific to stacks with their quarterback. I'm just going to go through all of these quarterback stacks that I've put together already. I've got Ryan with no less than one of Julio Jones. I've got Goff with 2 of Woods, Cooks, and Everett. Why? Because again, if you check out Goff last week, and I want to show this, okay? Goff. Last week, 18 points, not a spectacular day. Just okay. Just all right. This is not going to win you a tournament. It's okay. It's not going to lose anything for you, but it's not going to win you a tournament. Now let's look at Woods. Even in a mediocre day for Goff, Woods has had a big day. And I'm going to assume that Cooks didn't do a whole lot. There it is. So what I'm establishing here, only 3 targets, 3 receptions last week. What I'm establishing here is, and he was going up against Patrick, but we knew not to play Cooks last week. Come on. I had an all-in on Robert Woods. But what we're establishing here is, in order for Goff to have a special day, both of these guys are probably going off. And since they're reasonably priced enough to where you can afford to in your lineup, that is the way to approach it. That's how I'm doing it. Now, these are for tournament entries. These are for mass multi-entry GPPs. Again, with the knowledge in mind that if you don't have above average performances from every player, you're not going to win the tournament. Now, here's I'm just going to go through some of the rest of these stacks. Teddy Bridgewater with exactly one of these 3 super turrets, Kirkwood, Smith, and Austin Carr. Then I set those same super turd wide receivers because they're in my player pool, only to be used with Teddy Bridgewater. Jared Cook, I've got him exclusively in stacks with Oakland against the Chiefs, so with Pat Mahomes, because I'm not using the Oakland quarterback. I don't want Cook unless it's in this game, because if Cook is scoring, then Mahomes is answering. Same deal with Jordy Nelson. If the Raiders are scoring, the Chiefs are answering. That's what I want. I got Galladay with Rodgers together. Again, Detroit scoring, Rodgers answering. So I'm just trying to do this to establish and get rid of any landmines. So if I just use Kenny Galladay, and he's in 30% of my lineups, if he fails, and he certainly could, if he fails, then he's going to kill 30% of my lineups, not exclusively in the game that he's in, but across the board. Whereas in this situation, he'll only kill those lineups with Aaron Rodgers, and if he's not scoring, it's less likely that Aaron Rodgers is having a big game anyway, so it's basically like killing 2 birds with 1 stone. All right, so we've established our quarterback player pool. Let's jump over to the wide running back position and kind of go through some of these guys. Real quick, McCaffrey, no go this week, resting starters. Zeke, resting starters. Gurley's out. Gordon, I don't trust. I don't trust him in a game that the Chargers do not need to win. Now, this could be a mistake. Chargers say they're going to play it out. There's some crazy scenario where they could advance if they win this game. But Gordon's been hurt a lot. I get it. I understand. If you want to play him, I'm just not taking the chance. I don't want to pay up this high and be disappointed. And in week 17, I'm going to try to lean on situations, pay up situations that I'm more confident in. And there aren't many. Saquon Barkley, similar situation, just hasn't been hurt. Giants could feature him, or they could pull him, halfway through and say, why are we playing our super stud in the last game of the season? And what if he gets hurt and messes him up for next year? I don't know, but there's no motivation here for the Giants. And it's even weirder when your opposing team brings in all their backups. At some point, it's just a little sketchy. So I'm not 100% all in on Saquon Barkley for that reason. I'll have exposure. But note that even the projected ownership is low here, so we'll see if that changes, but, this is pretty low. Kamara, I don't even get this. He's not going to play. James Conner, one of my favorites this week. I love the spot for James Conner. He crushed the Bengals last time they played each other. So if you remember that game, and the Bengals cannot stop the run, as long as Connor gets his run, he's going to do well. Chris Carson, a late add to my player pool. The Seattle just messes with you. They have nothing to play for. I could totally see this being a disaster for Carson, and I like him much, much more on Fanduel, where he's significantly cheaper. Much cheaper, relatively speaking, than he is on DraftKings. And that's where I'll use him more so, but I just wanted to display that. I'm going to have him in my pool, but I'm going to say I'm nervous about him because Seattle has nothing to play for. Nothing. And they are really weird with their coaching decisions. Sometimes they'll have nothing to play for and just roll this guy out. And it's also important to note that Arizona is just so bad against the run that you really want to play a running back against them. And if Seattle's going to leave their starters in there because that's what they've done in the past, then YOLO. Let's play Chris Carson a little bit, but don't go crazy. Damian Williams I have in my pool, although again, I don't know what the deal is with Ware and Williams. I may just pull them because these guys could completely split touches. Both could make value, but I'd love a blurb from the Chiefs as far as who is going to be the primary guy. If we knew Damian Williams, for example, was quote-unquote the starter, I would have very heavy exposure to him. It's a spectacular matchup. It would be an all-in play without Spencer Ware. I would have 100% exposure, not one lineup without him. But the fact that Ware is coming back and we don't actually know who the starter is, yeah, Damian Williams has played great, but is Ware actually the guy? I don't know. You don't know. We don't know. Makes it tough. Gonna wait and see if we can hear a blurb or figure this part out, but for now, I don't know. Jamal Williams, absolutely, getting all the touches for Green Bay. Sure, it's a tough matchup against a Detroit defense that's pretty good, and Snacks Harrison, blah, blah, blah. Blah, blah, blah. I heard it all. You know what I say? Fuck that. I don't give a shit. Give me a starter in the Packers offense, getting every single snap at running back, and I'm playing him. It's that fucking simple. CJ Anderson getting all the looks for the Rams. Hell yeah. Not touching Ingram, not touching any of these guys. I'm not a Rod Smith pay up $5,500 for him kind of guy. I don't even know if he's going to start when they bring him in. Let somebody else do that. It's not my thing. Fournette, hell no. Cohen, hell no. These guys, hell no. Hell no. Hell no. Right? So I'm looking for players that are going to play. McGuire, not a bad spot. New England, not that great against running backs. I like running backs on winning teams, but, I don't think the Jets are anywhere near a winning team, but they throw to McGuire too, so I don't think he really kind of falls out of this game no matter what happens. I think he's going to be in there a little bit. I don't see a smash spot by any extent of the imagination, but if he scores a tutty, he's in good shape. He's in great shape. They'll throw to him a couple times. He'll get some yardage. Patriots can be run on. This is all about, the McGuire play is all about, will the Jets be competent on the road? They've been competent at home. If there's a home game for the Jets, I'd probably be all in on McGuire. Not because I think they're going to win, but they're competent at home. Not sure what they're going to look like on the road. All right, Sony Michel in the player pool. Splitting carries 3 ways. Not in love with that, but the Patriots are favored massively at home, and that is where Sony Michel shines. Look out for Rex Burkhead coming in and vulturing, but I have a hard time seeing a situation where if the Patriots are on the goal line, Michel will probably come in and get a touchdown. I could see him getting 100 yards, even in a game where he's splitting looks with Rex Burkhead and even James White a little bit. Lamar Miller in and out of my player pool all weekend. Same with Tevin Coleman. I don't know. I'm not a Tevin Coleman guy. I'm just not. Lamar Miller, meh. Jacksonville, meh. It's just like Miller to come out against Jacksonville and they'll put up 150 yards and 2 touchdowns. It's hard to throw on the Jaguars, so teams tend to attack them via the run, and they're actually attackable. They're kind of a team on the quit, so I'm going to add them to the pool. I don't know how Breida got in there. Jeff Wilson Jr. Breida's not playing, obviously. Jeff Wilson Jr. is Jeff Wilson Jr. is going to be getting all the touches for San Francisco, and so he's going to be someone who is in a decent spot, going to get a lot of looks for 4,400. I'm definitely going to play him. He's going to have a ton of volume. Don't know if he's going to smash. He could be a 10-point guy, but, you know, he's going to get all the volume he can handle. I've got Jalen Richard. So some long shots I've gotten in the player pool here. GPP kind of. Jalen Richard, I expect the Raiders to be playing from behind, which is sets up better for Richard than for Doug Martin. I haven't played much of Richard all season, but this is a weird week, and there aren't like extreme established stud plays at running back, so we're going to allow for some of these turd plays. Brian Hill backing up Tevin Coleman. I could see a situation where I know Coleman's going to play, but he's kind of hurt, where they just kind of stick with Brian Hill. Again, that's GPP only. Hill had a pretty decent game last week. Actually looked great on his carries, but didn't get a ton of volume. But he did break a 60-yard run. So GPP play right there. Keep it on going. A couple of other super turds, as I like to call them. We've got Peyton Barber. Haven't played him all year, but I mean, a running back against the Falcons is always going to be in play. He actually did pretty well against the Falcons in the first game. They even threw to him a few times, so clearly Tampa at least somewhat knows that you can throw to running backs when taking on this Falcons defense. He's 3,600. It won't take much for him to crush value. Hoyce Freeman starting for the Broncos. High ownership projection. Going to be the starter for 3,500. Tough to pass up a starter for 3,500. The only concern here is, and this is a home game for Denver. They're going to play well at home. You know, this is a division rivalry. They're going to want to win. Case Keenum is hoping to secure himself a job for next season. Good luck with that. But no, it's a home game. Now, if you want to, the pivot off of him is Devontae Booker. The pass catching running back, also super cheap for Denver. So he's worth a look as well. I think he might be the better play, or at least the better alternative GPP play. I don't think either of these guys are going to have a great game or put up massive numbers, but it's more of a salary-based thing. So if you need the salary, Booker catches passes. And the ultimate super crazy tournament play, Dwayne Washington, Saints' only other running back on the roster that isn't Kamara or Ingram. And if you can get Dwayne Washington at home for the Saints in a heavy volume workload, even with the backups, facing, in essence, a broken Panthers defense with a quality starting quarterback in Teddy Bridgewater, who is not a turd. If I could just know for a fact that Washington is the starter, if they can announce that, I don't know if they will, but I almost want to assume it and just roll with this guy. So I do like him. And I'm going to raise up his projection a little bit as well to make sure he at least shows up in some lineups. All right, wide receiver position. Just going through it. Again, I've already created the pool, but we're going to kind of take a look again and show you what I've put together here. Antonio Brown, sure, exclusively with Ben. Roethlisberger for me this week. He's got some sort of a questionable issue, but I don't see anybody not playing for the Steelers in this must-win game. Julio Jones. Absolutely, he's playing. I'm playing him. There's a record he's going for. He's been crushing every week. It's Tampa. There's a lot of things working for him. Reek, basically an exclusive stack with Mahomes play. I don't like Reek as much as Kelsey this week, but he can just crush at any given time. He just has to catch some of those bombs that Mahomes throws to him every single game. I could totally see it happening. 2 of those, and he smashes slate and breaks it wide open. Ownership projection very high on him. I think, to me, Tyreek is more of a play with Mahomes guy than maybe just an all-purpose play this week, so that's how I'm going to approach him. Do I have that set up? No. Let's set that up. You might say, well, what if he has a great game? Why can't I play him with anyone else? And the idea, again, being you can do whatever you want. But if I'm making 20% of my lineups with Mahomes anyway, and let's say I want to have I'll have Kelsey in a lot of them, and I'll have now Hill in some of them. Some of them I'll have them together. But if Hill doesn't have a great game and I play all the way up for him, he will kill your lineup. He will destroy it. He needs like a 25-plus point game. If he's doing that, Mahomes is beasting. So fuck it. I might as well just play him with Mahomes. That's the idea. And then if he has one of his 8 or 9 point games, again, being a volatile tournament player, then at least he'll only kill my Mahomes lineups that he's in. He won't kill my other lineups. Where am I? Yeah, Hill. So Schuster, I like Schuster this week. I think he's going to knock the stank off of that fumble from last week. I think the Steelers are going to purposefully feed him. And being that the Bengals defense is so bad, you can attack them however you want. I think there'll be a concerted effort to sort of, kind of have a positive day for Juju and kind of don't go into the offseason thinking, you destroyed your team's chances. Go into the offseason having a good game. Especially if the Steelers don't actually make the playoffs, which they don't know as they'll be playing if that's going to happen. Love DAVANTE Adams as long as he plays. He's an all-purpose play for me. I'll play him even in non-Rodgers lineups. Evans, we already discussed. Stack with Winston. Edelman, straight-up play. A little pricey on DraftKings. I like him better on Fanduel, but actually, no, I like him better on DraftKings, but he is a little pricey here. It doesn't have as much of a ceiling maybe as some of these other guys, but I think this is a ceiling potential game for him, taking on this last-ranked Jets defense versus slot receivers. Bobby Woods, all-around play. Love him across the board. Kenny G, only with Rodgers and game stacks. Brandon Cooks, only with... I've already set these up, but only with Jared. I think Kenny Golladay should be in here as well. I'm trying to see if I've set up all of these rules already. Yeah, Golladay only with Aaron Rodgers. So these are already rules I've set up, and you could take a look. This tutorial isn't about, hey, copying exactly what I'm doing here, and I hope that's not what anybody's doing. This is about learning how to put together mass multi-entry lineups using the DFSArmy.com tools. I haven't even jumped over to the research station where you can really kind of back up some of these claims. We have ratings on all of the all of the quarterbacks, and as you can see, the ones I'm using are highly rated. The ones I'm not using, really not as highly rated. We're staying away from these guys. Staying away from this. I want highly rated. Obviously, Drew Brees isn't playing, so that is meaningless. But we're staying away from these low-rated guys for the most part, outside of Josh Allen, who has that crazy upside going. And we want to stick with the high-rated guys. So if you wanted a simple way of looking at this stuff, this is it. Now, then we make our own decisions. Like I am playing Carr and I'm not playing Brady just because I think these guys can lean on the run. But, they're there. The ratings are right here for you. You see the best spots. They're rated. So you could see, wow, yeah, Arizona. I mean, you want to take running backs against those guys, right? The Bengals, you want to take running backs. There's a reason that these guys are rated highly. Now, obviously, some of them aren't playing, so it is what it is. There it is. McGuire, not a great rating. That's the whole thing. Barber, pretty highly rated, considering. Now, this is more looking at a matchup rating. There's also the player's talent level and all that is factored in a little bit, but the primary thing we're looking at with these ratings is the matchup. Dwayne Washington. Look who's popping. Now, it's not a high rating, but I mean, the RB3 showing up. So anyway, that's where a lot of this stuff comes from. Now, what do these ratings take into account? They're taking into account defense, they're taking into account player projection value and all of that. But take a look. Obviously, these Thomas not playing, so it doesn't matter. But Edelman, highest rated wide receiver we have. But some of the other high rated ones, you have Robert Woods, Juju, Jones, Adams. They're all coming in with decent ratings. So this isn't the end-all be-all, but what this is a look into, all right, who should we even be thinking about? I haven't even gotten to my favorite pay-down option. Let's get to it. But we have a few really good pay-down options, but these are stud-level things. Alshon Jeffrey only with Foles, Robbie Anderson, standalone play. Bobby Foster, I like him across the board. A little expensive on DraftKings here. He's much more reasonably priced on Fanduel this week, but I like him anyway. He seems to be the best guy for the Bills, and I think the Bills at home are going to get back to what they were doing before, which is, throwing bombs to Foster, really. Sean Hamilton's been the best guy for the Chargers, and he should avoid their best cornerbacks, mainly playing out of the slot. Cobb, probably and exclusively with this price, he's going to be an exclusive with RODGERS guy for me. Nelson, I talked about him. He's getting a ton of targets every single week, even if he's old and slow. I don't know what's going on here, why these guys pop back in. We're going to have to look at that. Golden Tate, only with Foles. Make sure that's a rule. I believe I did that. No, it looks like I did Aguilar twice. So let's go Golden Tate. This is an example of how to set up this rule. Exclusively with Foles. I don't want Tate in a non-Nick Foles lineup. Where are we? Okay. It'll get quicker as we get past this wide receiver position. But Tate, there we go. Demarius, what the fuck? All right, Chris Godwin. One of my favorite plays on the slate. Across the board, Deshaun Jackson is out. I like Winston anyway. Godwin has been very, very solid without Winston in there. And so for a paydown option at wide receiver with massive upside, I like him as an across-the-board play. He doesn't have to be just with Winston, so we won't set up the rule that way. And here we go. Zay Jones is an exclusive with Allen play. Valdez-Scantling only with RODGERS. Aguilar actually might be playable across the board the way that Nick Foles loves him. So I'm going to take off this Aguilar with just Foles because I actually don't mind Aguilar as a standalone play for $3,800. It's just so cheap. Bourne I love with Pettis out for the 49ers. You could throw on them a little bit. They're going to be throwing a lot. I don't think he's going to have this big game, but it's the price that I like. And if I kind of just project what Pettis has been doing onto Bourne, he's well underpriced for what he could deliver. Traquan is exclusively with Teddy Bridgewater, and I'm just trying to see if there's anyone else that we're targeting. Dante Moncrief, a little super punt action. Don't want too much of that. Kirkwood again with Bridgewater, and Carr with Bridgewater as well. Okay, let's move on to tight end. All right, here we go. Travis Kelce, top guy. Love him across the board, every type of lineup. Ertz, Kittle, those are your three superstar tight ends this week. I think it's going to be Kelce, Kittle, then Ertz in that order for me as far as how much exposure I'm going to want. Projected ownership has Kelce the highest, followed by Ertz and then Kittle. So I like the fact that Kittle is going to be a little bit lower owned. Look at what Kittle's been doing. I just want to establish this. Couple reasons why I would like him. 12, 8, 9, 9. I mean, the target numbers are crazy. Sometimes he crushes with a reasonable amount of targets, and this was against the Bears, and he did pretty well. So Kittle's just good. Let's check the research station at the tight end position, and we will see that, there's a reason why these guys are the way they are. Look at these ratings. But Kittle is 9.6. He's in a good spot. Rams defense, just below average against tight ends, which is fine. Giving up 10 points per game. A lot of targets to the tight end position when facing the Rams. Now, Jared Cook is in an equally great spot. Check this out. KC, 31st ranked against tight ends and giving up a ton of points to the tight end position. So that's interesting. And of course, Cincinnati, and that's why we got Vance McDonald in the mix. Normally, I don't really like him that much, but I mean, I can't ignore that he's facing the worst defense against tight ends. So you can check out the ratings, but the best situation is going to be Kelsey, because he is Travis Kelce, and he's awesome, and he's facing an Oakland team giving up a ton of points to tight ends. So that's your chalk. You know, he's the best player with the highest ranking. Easy. Will he do what he normally does? We'll see. But he's the best player with the highest ranking. And then followed by these two, but we like these guys as players more, so that's where that comes into play. Ertz will be, I think, my least of these three. Not that I don't like Ertz. I love Ertz, and certainly I'm going to stack Foles with him pretty consistently, but again, the Redskins, the Eagles are spreading it around a little bit right now with Jeffrey, Tate, and Ertz all getting involved, and more so, I don't see the Redskins scoring. And I think the Eagles are just going to control it via the run, because they've shown a tendency when they can to control the football via the run, and I think that's just what they're going to do against Washington. Washington should not be able to score against them, so I don't think the Eagles are going to have to press the issue at all. Therefore, that increases the risk for Ertz compared to these other two. No one else even a sniff on the radar. Ratings make it easy. Crushing every week. All right. Finally, defense. I don't need this to tell me what the defenses are this week. I'm going to establish our player pool. And Seahawks, I think, are the best defense overall, taking on the Cardinals. But obviously, they're one of the more expensive ones. I like the Steelers here, facing backup quarterback. Cardinals don't even have a backup quarterback. They have, like, Rosen, who's just terrible, and Seahawks are great at home. Look what they did. They actually limited MAHOMES a little bit. So they're just good. Texans, Jaguars, I mean, you know, it's Blake Bortles starting. Here we have the Patriots enabled because they're taking on a Jets team that has been turnover prone on the road. Playing a little bit better recently, though not going to get super excited about them. Ravens, only in play, again, facing a rookie quarterback. I like the Cleveland offense. They're hot, so I'm not in love with this. But the Ravens defense is so good. And they've led to more Millie Maker winning. They've been in the Millie Maker winning lineup the most often out of any defense all season. I love that. Saints, I love this week. No one's going to want to be on them because they're playing backups. But Carolina's playing third and fourth stringers at quarterback and all these other positions. I think they're going to destroy the Panthers. And this fourth string quarterback who's never played with the team. You can't play well in the NFL. They're going to not be using Christian McCaffrey, I think, for most of the game. This Panthers team is going to get smoked. So I love the Saints. They'll be my top exposure. And Bills at home, okay. Eagles, fine on the road. Not as excited as a home team. But I love the Saints so much. I'm going to even raise this up a bit here. So there we go. We've established our rules. We've checked out the new rules as far as the ability to disallow stacks of particular players with anyone that's not their quarterback or the opposing quarterback. Very sharp. It's going to increase the likelihood that the total sum of your lineups will produce a winner, and it will decrease the likelihood of some bad play turning up all of your lineups, which we've all seen and been horrified by. As we're running the lineups, I want to send out a reminder because this is on YouTube and the public can see it. Normally, a lot of these videos that we do are, or podcasts are for DFSArmy.com subscribers. But if you're watching this and you like this type of analysis, we do this for all sports in the DFS Army. Our goal is to teach our members how to play like pros. We provide tools. You saw the research station. We've got a correlation matrix. We've got wide receiver quarterback charts for NFL, but we do this for every sport. So if you're watching this and you want to take your game to the next level and you haven't already done so, go to DFSArmy.com, sign up as a VIP member, use promo code GEEK, you get 10% off, and start playing like a pro. Start competing like a pro. Does it mean that you're going to win $100,000 by joining? Hell no. We all are trying to win. What we're doing is putting together tools. We're condensing research. We have coaching. So a person who has 2 kids and a job can come home after work, pop on at 5 o'clock, Check out the NBA stuff, check out the breakdowns, check out the research station, use the optimizer, create a bunch of lineups, and have some fun that night watching games with a rooting interest and the possibility of a big win. We just had a $100,000 winner like 2 days ago for NBA. Another life was changed. That's a regular thing. We'll have another one in the next week. Doesn't mean you're going to win 100,000. If you're listening and you're a DFSRN.com VIP, you guys know this. Listen, it's a grind. It's about being in the game. It's about learning your bankroll management approaches. It's about understanding how you're allocating contests and what kind of lineups you're building for what type of contest. We try to teach it. Everybody wants a quick, snap your fingers sort of, hey, let me make 100,000 tomorrow thing. It doesn't work that way. And the more you chase the big prize, probably the less you're ever going to win. But it's about being in the game. It's about grinding, putting out enough lineups to staying with your head above water until that point where you finally hit the big win. That's how DFS works. It's very hard to be profitable until you hit a massive win. All right, so let's look at our exposures real quick as I've run through. And you see here, you got your quarterback, Mahomes, 25%. So I'm going to assign another 5% somewhere. I see here that I probably only counted out a small amount of this. We'll have another 5% to allocate, unless I want Mahomes at 25%. That phone is ringing. I probably should have put it on buzz, but it didn't, so whatever. Enjoy the music. At running back, I hate these exposure percentages. There's no way I'm going to allow for that. So Hoist Freeman, more of a low-owned play for me than anything else. So let's take a look here, and how are we going to control it? All right, I'm getting way too much Freeman. Right? I don't want this guy 90% of my lineups. Hell no. So let's control it. 20% max. Put a dislike on him. Barber, same thing. You know, you add a player to the pool, and they're cheap, they're going to show up everywhere. But we have to establish how much we want. So a lot of times what I use, people ask, how do you know how much of a player to use? Like, how do you know? Check out the projected ownership, okay? This is something that's very important also. Check out the projected ownership, right? Now let's say Barber is 5% owned projection. Well, if I want to have heavy exposure, if I like him, I might go 10%. I'm not going to go 68% on some fucking turd who hasn't had a good game all season. All right, that's going to limit these guys. Now you see another guy popping. So you're like, hey, what's the story with that guy? We're going to do the same. You, as the player, control your exposures. The exposure. Now, some people are afraid to mess with it. Well, I don't want to mess with the magic of the optimizer. That's more of an NBA thing. For NBA, for NFL, don't worry about that. Control your exposures. This is football. Projections are not the end-all, be-all. It's a very volatile sport. The best projection systems are less than 40% accurate. Whereas for basketball, the accuracy numbers on projections are in the 70s. High 60s, mid 70s for the best. We track it. For NFL, it's nowhere near that. So I wouldn't get too crazy with worrying about going against the projection system. We want to control our exposures so we're not overly exposed to any one fucking turd who will ruin all of our lineups. Okay? A guy like Jeff Wilson Jr., let's set him up as a 20%er for now. You know, we don't want too much of these guys. I'm going to want a lot more John Connor. He's my dude this week, and he's not popping, so I'm going to control that. And this is how I do it. I run it, I look, and I control it. Barkley I'm not in love with, just because I'm a little nervous about his volume. So, and that projected ownership is very low, so I'm going to set him up for 20%. Connor. This is how we set up. This is how it works. You got to spend time. Let's see who's popping. Run it again. There we go. Now I'm starting to see some names that I like. I might increase my CJ Anderson a little bit here, but this is starting to look a little bit better. Abort that. Let's go to 20.5 for Connor. Let's go to 0.7. This is just going to get me more of the guys that I want a little bit more of, right? And if I see somebody who I'm missing out on, I'll increase them as well. Herndon, that's ridiculous. Oh, here's another important function. Flex position. Who do we want in the flex? And I'm not going to allow for more than, let's say, 30. Normally I actually drop tight end down to about 10%. This week I'm going to go 30% because I do like some of these tight ends as tournament plays. Let's go to Herndon, who is popping like crazy. Again, you know, last week, it's funny. Last week somebody in my channel said, hey, Herndon is popping like crazy on the Dom Station. What should I do? And I'm like, listen, if you don't like him, uncheck him or reduce your ownership. I don't know what to do. Then Herndon, of course, goes off and has a 20-point day and just crushes and was in the perfect lineup. But, you know, that's not always going to happen. What happens with an optimizer tool is if a player is super cheap and has a reasonable projection, they're going to pop everywhere. I don't want some fucking Jets tight end on the road loading up my lineups when Travis Kelce is in this player pool and Zach Ertz and Kittle. It's too much. And you got to run all the way through because you see Kelce popping high. You got to kind of run the whole thing because all the Mahomes lineups are popping up first, and he's going to be in all those Mahomes lineups. Right now you got Kittle and Ertz fighting it out. Little Gerald Everett and some of those Goff lineups popping up. It's a little bit better. I want to get some Jared Cook in there too. So what I'm going to do, because I want Jared Cook in some of those game stacks. Now he can't be used outside of the game stack because we've already established that. So now I can actually jack up his projection a little bit so that he shows up in some of those game stacks. There we go. Note, like, let's look for Cook, right? Where's he going to show up? Only in a lineup that has Mahomes in it. Got to raise up Hill a little bit because, you know, you have to watch these. If I've got 20 lineups with Mahomes and Hill isn't showing up anywhere, let's go to 21.5. I'm going to raise him up a little bit to make sure he's showing up in at least some of the Mahomes lineups. This is kind of like the little bit of, there we go. Now maybe it's too much. Let's see how much Kelce we're getting. Yeah, there we go. Mahomes, Hill, Kelce together. Mahomes, Hill, Kelce together. But he's not showing up very much outside of those lineups. So let's just pause it here. Hill is in 10% of my lineups. Kelce in 50%. Mahomes, 28%. So what I've set up here is Hill, Mahomes, Mahomes with some Hill and Kelce, Mahomes with some just Hill, and Mahomes with some Kelce. That's how you do it. Okay? Keep running it through. So this is how we're going to now set up our final player pool. Now part of the deal here is got to watch these exposures and make sure that some of these players that we've kind of targeted are showing up. You have to control your exposures. There's Booker. All these names that we talked about starting to pop in. If I'm not seeing enough of a guy, I'm going to raise up their projection a little bit to make it so that they start to pop up. So I'll run through the whole thing, and then I'll go back to my player pool and say, oh, this is the guy I wanted. Is he here? No? I like Kittle maybe a little more than this, you know what I mean? So you might go raise him up a little bit. I'm going to look at my... see how long we're approaching 60 minutes, so that's about it for this one. You know, I'm going to control my defense exposure. I'm going to control my exposures by changing the projection to get more or less of particular players that I want more or less exposure to. It's that simple. I mean, that's way too much Godwin. This is a ridiculous amount. I didn't even look at this, you know, like Moncrief. Yeah, right. He's a 5%er. Got to understand. Look at this projected ownership, 0.28. So if I give him 5%, I'm way over the field. That's enough. So if you're looking for how to set up your exposures, look no further than the projected ownership numbers. And then this will be updated today, but obviously because some of these are off. But look at these projected exposure numbers, projected ownership. And rather than trying to figure it out on your own, say, do I want to be above or below the field with this person? And we can use this number as a baseline most of the time. One last run, see where we're looking right now, and then I will continue. This is not a final product. I'm just going to continue and keep messing with this. That's just how I roll. So this is kind of the process. And as the weekend rolls on, as we approach Sunday, I'll continue to modify and edit and look through my pool until I have it just right. I will already have reserved all my contests, and I will do a late edit at some point on Sunday morning or Sunday before the game start with my final edit. I never finalize my lineups usually until a couple hours before, because so much information comes out in those last minutes. And those last hours before lock, we'll start to hear about who's starting where, and so many things that we even don't know right now, which is why it's so important to not, throw your lineups in on Friday and just be done. That's not how I work. I'm working all the way up right to lock, and most of the time, my final edit's going in with seconds to spare. Don't do that. Anyway, that's it. Little tutorial, little breakdown of week 17. I hope this helps. I hope this helps you guys understand how mass multi-entry is and how it works, and what to do and the approach and all of that. And hopefully checking out the new stacking functionality for the Domination Station. We added a bunch of other things in this recent update for other sports. Our single game setup is improved now. You will notice a massive difference. I've changed the algorithm for the single game format. It's going to be really, really cool, and it's going to really blow your minds as far as the improvement goes. And we've done some behind the scenes things as well. I have some incredible updates planned for the Domination Station Optimizer over the next few months, so stay tuned for that. Big one is going to be a more powerful type of algorithm that we're going to do server-side optimization, and it's really going to allow for stacking in some of the other sports in a really interesting way. And then I have some incredible ideas for next season NFL as well, which you can stay tuned for that. That is it for this one, guys. Good luck week 17. Hopefully this video helped you understand the approach to mass multi-entry for NFL.